Hello, Janet and string theory knitters. My name is Sarah Keller, and I live in Hood River, Oregon, in the Columbia River Gorge. And I'm a knitter and a spinner and a designer, and I own the yarn shop Not Another Hat. So thank you, Janet, for asking me to be part of your fun plans for March. And I'm going to answer a few questions now for you that Janet has sent to me. One of them is, what is my favorite part of the creative process? And I don't think of myself as a really inspired designer. I tend to go for long periods of time with no ideas whatsoever, and then all of a sudden it hits, and it hits hard, and I might sketch out 6 or 7 designs in 24 hours and cast them all on and get them in process and write drafts of their patterns. And then I'll work on those and finish them up over a long period of time, and I might go for another long period of time where I just don't feel any inspiration at all, which is great because there's plenty of other things out there to knit that other great inspired people have designed. And so I do that until inspiration strikes again, but I do love that feeling when it hits and everything just lights on fire and my mind's going a million miles a minute. So that's my favorite part. Another question Janet asked is, what is my most unusual source of inspiration? And I have a little story about one of my designs. It's not that unusual, but it's just kind of a funny little story. Back in 2009, before I had ever designed a sweater, I was in a tiny little town in the way north of Sweden, at a coffee shop knitting. And a woman came in and was paying for her coffee wearing a sweater that I immediately was struck by. And so I grabbed my napkin and a pen and I started drawing out this sweater, and I was just sure I needed to recreate this as a knitting pattern, a hand knitting pattern. I carried that napkin around with me for like 4 years in the bottom of my knitting bag before it finally occurred to me that I could just take a picture of it with my phone and save it that way, which I did. Got rid of the napkin. And then I carried it around in my phone camera roll for another 4 years. And eventually, when Marie Green contacted me to be a part of her Change Makers booklet, which was a fundraiser for the Southern Poverty Law Center, immediately I just knew that this was the design I was going to do for that book. So that little sketch turned into the intertwined sweater, which was in the Change Makers book and now is in my Ravelry store. So that was a kind of unusual, long, drawn-out process on that one. What do I like to listen to while I'm knitting? I'm a big audio book and podcast fan, and I pour through them all. I just tear through them all. They play when I'm in the car, they play when I'm knitting. I've got AirPods for Christmas, which is like the best ever. They're always in my ears. But I have to say, one of the things I really love to listen to when I'm knitting is the podcast My Favorite Murder. Die-hard murderino here, always have been ever since I was little, and I read true crime books at probably too young of an age, but definitely My Favorite Murder is my favorite thing to listen to when I'm knitting. And when there's no new episodes, I go back to my favorite audiobook of the day, which right now I'd have to say is the series by Robert Galbraith, the Cormorant Strike series. Just finished the newest one of that. Now I'm sad I have to wait again. So happy knitting, everybody, and happy spring.